I think so.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. We're doing the DoD panel here at the Shift Summit. We're going to introduce the panelists really quickly. My name's Jake Chapman. I'm a venture capitalist. I run a firm called Marque Ventures. We are a pure play defense investment firm. Also do dual use investing. But I really like investing in defense solutions, pure play defense solutions, and I think dual use is a problematic strategy. Happy to chat with people about that after the panel. We're going to do really quick introductions, and then we're just going to dive into questions. I'm going to have all the panelists introduce themselves first. Maybe a couple minutes on yourself, your background, and then your organization and what makes it particularly interesting or unique in the ecosystem. So Shruti, if you can kick it off.
Sure. Hi, my name is Shruti Picard. I'm the Deputy CDAO for Acquisition at the NIF, New Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office at the Office of the Secretary of Defense. So myself, I call myself a former engineer. I left industry as a computer engineer and started at the DoD, and I thought I'd be there for 2 years, and here I am 2 decades later. I'm wondering how I'm still here. So for those of you who don't know, CDAO, that's the acronym. I'd say we're coming up almost 2 years as a brand new organization, the newest PSA at OUSD, and we were created, as we call it, through the acquisition and merger of several organizations in the department. So the Joint AI Center, some of you are probably very familiar with Jake, the Defense Digital Service, as well as the Chief Data Officer they were all reporting to the Secretary at the time. And then we also took parts of the Advana that was under the Comptroller's Office, parts of Maven, and the ADA initiative, the Accelerate the AI and Data to make CDAO. So hopefully that covers a little bit of what I am and what the organization is about. And really our mission as CDAO is to make sure that we're accelerating the adoption of data analytics and AI across the department to really generate the decision advantage. And we look at it both from the boardroom and all the way to the battleground. So,
yeah. I'm Alex Campbell. I work with the Defense Innovation Unit. I'm the lead for Navy and Maritime programs there. The Defense Innovation Unit reports directly to SecDef within OSD, and that's a change from a little bit earlier this year. DIU was created in the 2016-2017 timeframe by then SecDef Ash Carter with a remit to essentially create an outpost in Silicon Valley and create opportunities and pathways for non-traditional defense performers to bring their tech, to bring their capability to solve DoD problems. And to some degree, it was a bit of an experiment, right? So originally, it was DIUX. And I think it was Secretary Mattis changed it to DIU because it went from an experiment to not an experiment. And that's really because we were able to demonstrate that you could absolutely take commercial technology and you could absolutely adapt it to DoD use cases, and you could absolutely use an acquisition pathway that was lightweight enough such that a small startup didn't have to navigate every last clause within the FAR when it comes to contracting. And so we created that lightweight acquisition pathway. We helped bring other transactional agreements back into vogue. They've been around for decades. And more recently, we've transitioned to what our director, Doug Beck, is calling DIU 3.0, which is taking this model of bringing commercial technology in, adapting it for DoD use case, but now applying it to the DoD's hardest problems, and really trying to apply it at scale. A lot of the projects we've done haven't necessarily scaled to the hundreds, to the thousands, right, to the billions. But we absolutely have the capacity and capability to do that, and we want to bring that model and scale that model to really deliver for COCOMs and to deliver for the services and ultimately for the DoD. So, thanks.
Awesome. Colonel Charles Brisbois. Everybody calls me Colonel BB or just BB. I am a combat rescue officer by training in the Air Force. I spent most of the first 20 years of my career leading small teams that are trained to pick up pilots that get shot down behind enemy lines. About 5 years ago, I got an opportunity to go help stand up what is now Air Force Futures, and had the opportunity there when it was called AFWIC, the Air Force Warfighting Integration Capability, to lead the disruptive technology team. And so I had a team of PhDs and officers with PhDs that were scouting and scanning across the labs, the FFRDCs, industry and academia to find technologies that were going to be important to the Air Force in 2035 and beyond. And then figure out ways to bring those back and match them up to our capability development teams. And so spent a lot of time naturally at DARPA trying to pull technologies out of the building. And then I went back to the rescue community as a group commander. I was running a task force covering the Middle East, and DARPA called back and said, hey, we've got this new organization, entity inside of DARPA that is called Commercial Strategy. And it's been a pilot, and we're trying to scale it out, and we'd love for you to come back and help us do that. And so I've been there a little over a year and a half now, and my official title is Senior Advisor to the Director for Commercialization. So.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. I'm Clay McGuire. I am at the organization formerly known as the Rapid Reaction Technology Office, which all the old people with gray hair in the room may recognize. But now we're called Innovation and Modernization. We are within OUSD R&E under Ms. Heidi Hsu, under Shotgun Browning, Mission Capabilities. And the purpose of our office is to do leap ahead technology prototypes within 2 years. So rapid and able to impact warfighter needs quickly. The thing that's interesting about my office is we're spending money in the year of execution, which is not a lot of the way that most of DoD offices work. So we don't have a BAA. We take projects right off our website. So for those of you founders on the audience, you can get to us very easily through the OUSD R&E website once you find us buried underneath the infrastructure. But I encourage anybody to reach out to me here or after. My background, I'm an Army officer. Prior to working at OUSD R&E, I was the Innovation Officer of the National Guard Bureau. Prior to that, I ran the technology outreach for what's been called many things, but you probably know it as JIATO, the Joint IED Defeat Organization, which became an agency for a year and then rolled into DARPA. Prior to that, I did technology development primarily for CBRNE systems. PhD in engineering. I came out of engineering at the University of Louisville and went right into DoD. And that's my background and our office.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, great. So this question is going to be for everybody. We'll go down the line, and I'm going to set a little bit of context first. So bear with me for a second. A recent event I was at, Dr. Condoleezza Rice said that this world that we're living in today is the most chaotic world she's ever seen. And she took care to point out that she was the National Security Advisor on 9/11, and she was Bush Sr.'s senior Soviet expert during the collapse of the Soviet Union. And she thinks this world is the most disordered world we've ever seen. About a year ago, Secretary LaPlante said, "The tech bros aren't helping us too much in Ukraine. They want to, but it's hardcore production of really serious weaponry that matters." Right now we have a war in Ukraine that's threatening to move into its third year. I'm sure everyone has seen the CSIS report about munition stockpiles here in the country. We have a war in the Middle East. Iran's proxies are firing on American soldiers abroad. And the former commander of Indo-PACOM, Admiral Davidson, has stated that he believes the most dangerous window for a Taiwan conflict is between 2024 and 2027, and I think we're in November 2023 right now. So we are potentially in what is the most dangerous world we've seen in a very long time. And so my question to sort of kick off this discussion is what can each of your organizations be doing with that time frame in mind, where we might be in what looks like a potential World War III-ish situation in the next 2 or 3 years? And how do you think about that? And we'll start with Clay at the end.
Oh, wow. Great. Thanks.
It's a light question.
Softball, right?
Yeah.
So the honest answer is we're doing work for all that. It's, I think one thing we can talk about if we get to it is the scale piece, right? But a lot of great ideas and the most innovative things that we do in defense, we have to develop a prototype and try it to see if it works. There's a lot of things that we're doing in my office right now with current year funds, and frankly, in Ukraine stuff that we started in last year, to take prototypes and see what works. Conflict, I agree. It's the conflicts that we're in today, especially recently, right? And what's going on with Israel. It's horrible, and it's violent, and it's a different type of warfare, right? Warfare always changes. One thing we learned in Afghanistan and Iraq when I was at JIDO was that the OODA loop of the enemy changes all the time, and we're always trying to go faster and see how to defeat the enemy's next move. And so it's really, in my opinion, about trying those new things and seeing what works and then scaling. And scaling is a tough question that we could take longer to tackle. But we're also doing things in PACOM and for various other COCOMs based on their needs in my office.
And as I understand it, your office is really about the prototyping. What do you do post-prototype phase to help the successful company scale?
That's an awesome question. So the perfect case is one where the service already has a program of record that exists that can do the care and feeding for that capability, right? We have program offices set up to manage capabilities cradle to grave, right? And in some cases, there is an office where that goes, and it's just a matter of finding out, okay, we're going to try this new weapon. Is it kind of like a mortar? Then PM Mortars over here in the Army is going to do the care and feeding of that if it works. Some of the more interesting ones are ones where there's no office. But the thing that happens in that case, especially in our more agile services, and I'd shout out to the Marine Corps because a lot of agility in that organization, in a matter of a year or two, they make the decision to stand up a PEO. And so we prototype, and by the time we're finished prototyping it, they're starting to write the requirement, and they've got a PEO stood up that's going to absorb that because they recognize that it's important.
I have a bureaucracy question for you. In your experience, when there isn't a PEO for a thing yet dedicated to it, so let's take small loitering munitions. Arguably, for the Army, it could be soldier lethality, it could be, I don't know, vertical lift, fixed wing, like it could fit in a lot of different PEOs. Are they generally trying to shove it to the other PEO so it's not in their budget, or are they fighting for the thing? Which way do you
No,
normally
I think
see
it's
it
a
go?
lot. It depends on what it is, and it depends on people and personalities. And I think it runs the gambit. You know, in some cases, it's always a bill, right? That you're asking a guy who's got a spreadsheet with numbers on it that's planned out over 5 years, that's funded in a budget document, and he's got to figure out how to absorb the cost of the new thing, which wasn't there when he put the budget in 2 years ago. So there's trade-offs to be made there. But in general, I think we've talked about it earlier this morning that senior level advocacy is the answer, right? Just like we talked about with young officers making arguments to the CNO earlier this morning, our bureaucracy is designed so that general officers can make those decisions.
Awesome, thanks. Colonel Beebe?
Yeah, so DARPA was started 65 years ago at another chaotic period, at the start of the nuclear age, when Sputnik was launched, and it was a strategic surprise to the United States, right? And it terrified the United States that our adversary had a weapon system that we didn't know about, one that could potentially deliver nuclear weapons to the United States, and so it was considered a strategic surprise. And so 4 months later, ARPA was created, the Advanced Research Project Agency. They added the D onto it many years later. But the mandate for DARPA is to ensure the nation never has strategic surprise of that nature again, right? And the way they do that is we're divided into roughly 6 tech offices that cover the gamut of science and engineering. And inside of each one of those, we have very incredibly talented program managers who are recognized as being the top engineer scientists in their field. And they come to DARPA for a very short period of time, and they bring big ideas of how they push, how they could possibly push the state of their science or engineering, into what could be 20 or 30 years down the road, but bring it into today, right? If you took all the barriers away and funding wasn't an issue, like how could you do that? And so that's how we're addressing the chaos of the world, right? We're trying to create, well, one, we're trying to prevent strategic surprise. We're trying to make sure that none of our adversaries out there have weapons that we don't know about, right? So we push the boundaries of science and technology to do that. And then second, if you're doing that, you naturally have the ability to create strategic surprise for others from what you discover in that, right? And so we have offices, buildings full of programs and performers that are working on things that are designed to be strategic surprises to others. My particular job is once one of those program managers has a performer, a small business that is on contract to do the research and engineering for them, and they come up with something that is meaningful and they need to turn that science project into a product. Generally, the teams that are working for DARPA are very technically based, but they don't have a lot of entrepreneurial experience or business experience, right? And so you get these spin-outs that say, hey, I've got something, but the whole team is PhDs in electrical engineers, as an example, or biologists, as another example. And they don't know how to start a company and turn that science project into a product. And so what we do is provide some tools. We have a grant. Essentially, it's a contract, but it acts like a grant that we can give DARPA performers to hire an embedded entrepreneur so that somebody can come in and help them find product market fit and do the business plan and that type of stuff. And then we have coaching and mentoring that we can offer them. And then ultimately, we have a group of curated investors, some in this audience, that really have patient capital and can take on an early stage defense-focused technology and help it scale. So that's what we're doing.
So before we move on, I think everyone in the audience here has a TSSCI, and this is a SCIF. I don't know if you know that. But, what's the fourth offset? What strategic surprise does DARPA have waiting for us? Do we have like invisible planes or anything you want to share? Big announcements?
Nothing I'm going to share on this stage, but DARPA's had an amazing history, and that history is going to continue. There's a lot of great programs.
All right, so I think DIU is doing 2 things, and I'll sort of bin them as symmetric and asymmetric. The first one is Admiral Aquilino, who is the commander of the Indo-Pacific Combatant Command, right? Recently stood up a Joint Mission Accelerator Directorate, and DIU is staffing the Deputy Director and CTO position there, as well as flowing other resources in to support JMAD, and which is the Joint Mission Accelerator Directorate, which has the challenge of making this capability called the Joint Fires Network real. And the Joint Fires Network is sort of an interesting thing because it sounds sort of like a program of record that has RDocs and PDocs in the president's budget and is fully funded out across the FIDP, but that's not the case at all. It is essentially a COCOM project that is being run at the COCOM level to accelerate the development of the ability to C2 a complex and rather large-scale war in the Pacific. There's a bunch of adjacent capabilities in terms of AI and modeling and sim, but DIU is laser focused on essentially taking the things that we have, like bombers and fighter aircraft, and destroyers and cruisers, and creating the C2 and the information architecture to deliver the right fires, the right weapons to the right place at the right time at a pace that, frankly, or at a tempo that outpaces the adversary. And in some cases, you've got a lot of traditional primes and some other companies that are supporting that work. And right now, our team is really focused on understanding what's working, what isn't working, and how we can bring in commercial technology to support the development of the Joint Fires Network and its adjacent capabilities. So that's on the symmetric side, right? And that's stuff and capability that needs to get delivered now, needs to push through experimentation into an MVP, into a fieldable product. And so that's well within the Davidson window, right? That obviously Admiral Aquilino cares quite a bit about. The second thing is on the asymmetric side. So you may be familiar, DepSecDef Hicks, I think back in August, announced the Replicator Initiative, which is designed to develop and field, right? Field is the operative word here, all domain attritable autonomous systems at scale, and to do it in 18 to 24 months from now, which is about as ambitious as it gets, but also is probably from a hardware and a software perspective of keen interest to this audience. And so DIU is effectively the implementer of that in conjunction, obviously, with the services. It's very much a team effort. Certainly R&E is playing a substantive role, as will CDAO in terms of, like I said, it's a hardware and a software collaboration of enterprise solutions, and then also very focused on edge autonomy, edge AI, and then being able to develop those systems, being able to field them, right? So scaling is a huge issue. The industrial base to deliver thousands of any of these sorts of systems just does not exist. We have daily conversations about the Defense Production Act and how it's going to apply to titanium production and lithium production, and focusing those resources on the development of these capabilities. So that's how we're getting after it in the near term.
I think everybody in the venture community who cares about defense is really interested in the Replicator program. There's a lot of potential for our portfolio companies, I think. I will say I was on the Hill 2 weeks after Secretary Hicks's announcement at the NDIA conference, meeting with some professional staff members of the House Armed Services Committee and PSMs. And at the end, I had a chance to ask them some questions, and I asked about Replicator. I'm not going to ask you how it's going to get funded.
Thank you.
But I think it's safe to say they were unhappy with the rollout. And if we're on this stage a year from today, do we think real progress will have been made, or was this kind of a false start, and like real progress will start next year given the rollout? I know Doug Beck's been doing a lot of work. So
there's obviously some variables at play here, funding being perhaps the primary one, right? But I think I've heard a couple times on this stage, if you could wish away whatever you wanted, and so I'll take advantage of that. And so let's wish away the funding. We're absolutely in a position, I think, as the DoD, to have systems that fit the bill for all domain attritable autonomy at scale, on contract, in production, 12 months from now. That is an attainable goal.
Awesome. I have portfolio companies to connect you to.
Yeah, no, brilliant.
Yeah.
So glad that Alex got the hard question about the replicator. So I think, so first of all, within CDAO, right, I think we all know Jake was created as a strategic response to what was happening with China. And
Not me. The Joint AI Center.
Not
I like
Jake.
to think I was
Not
created
Jake,
in response to
the
strategic problems.
Jake,
But
yes. That's funny. But within CDAO, right, so we are obviously looking to be a data-centric organization, right? And I think one way we want to be able to respond to whether it's today's challenges or tomorrow's is that we have the quality data, trustworthy data, at our hands, at the leadership level, readily available, so we can make the right decision at the right time, and not just bad data, make faster decision force. So we have organizations like DDS that are currently supporting and have been supporting, I would say, for the last couple of years, no matter which operations we're looking at, right? Whether it's the Ukraine war, whether it's the Afghanistan evacuation, et cetera, et cetera. We're using the Advana program the same way. A lot of the capabilities are being used by the combatant commanders, as well as the other parts of the department. I would say we're trying to make sure that as an organization, those are the ways we're both tactically helping today's problems, right? And then thinking strategically. So we bring the department forward than where we have been or where we need to be, but we're not there yet, to help those problems using data, using analytics, and then leveraging the artificial intelligence, and the cutting edge technologies. From my vantage point and from the acquisition organization side, some of you may be familiar with the TradeWinds ecosystem, right? So we have the TradeWinds portal we've created. I'm really proud of the work that the team has done there. So we have several, very innovative procurement vehicles that are out there, Try AI, where we're bringing in really at no cost technologies to test out and basically giving free feedback to the industries about, hey, this is a good capability, or these are some of the things we could, do better, or actually looking to scale some of those things, right? So one of the things we're focusing on, hey, we've tried this out for the last couple of years. This is awesome. We really want to now go do a FAR-based, maybe follow on either OT or FAR-based contract. We have something called Solutions Marketplace, if you're not aware of that. Very low cost, right, to basically a 5-minute video. You're answering several questions, and we have a whole evaluation process. And if you go through that process and you meet the criteria, now you are on our website, and you're basically awardable. You can be awarded by any parts of the department, any organization, including ourselves. So the other ways we're trying to do is that we are a lot of the folks that are in this audience here, as well as some of the larger companies that are out there, right? Because ultimately, one of the points you made about how the department may be viewed at different levels or different types of industry partnership, right? And before coming here, I was the Cyber Command's first acquisition executive for 3 years, and I would say, with that, in my experience here and my really over 2 decades in the DoD, we benefit really from all across the spectrum from our industry partner, whether it's the large, industrial complex companies as well as the startups, right? A lot of our cyber capabilities are built on the unclassified side by the people who have no clearance, right? And same with what we're trying to do here. So one of the things in CDAO, what I'm trying to get my team to think about is that how do we diversify our portfolio? What are we not thinking about? Because we have been talking about it, but I feel like we have a ways to go. So on 30th November, so CDAO is going to be hosting its procurement forum, and we're literally going through this right now to make sure, hey, we are making sure companies that we've never done business with, we're bringing in startups into the fold, so they will be there listening to what our procurement requirements are for the next upcoming year.
Awesome. Yeah, I will say I had my first experience with the TradeWinds platform in the last couple of weeks, and it was sort of a good news, bad news story.
Yeah.
Are you ready for it?
Yeah,
We're going to do it live on stage.
Every time I talk, I'm like, I love to hear what are the feedback and what we can do better.
All right, so here's the feedback. We were looking at a particular solicitation.
Yes.
The date was a certain date.
Uh-huh.
We refreshed it.
I hope it's not the one.
And it moved up a week and a half.
Really?
To the day of the day I had refreshed it, the date moved up. And I was flying. But we got it in because the platform is so well designed and the process is so easy. It didn't matter you had moved it up a week and a half, other than we could have missed the date.
So I'm going to punt it to say if we moved it up, it's not us moving it up, it's the customer who put the challenge out there, because we facilitate everybody's requirements out there, right? So when we're doing the call to industry. That being said, that is really unfair, right? I literally give people a hard time about it. Why would you put a deadline on 4th of July weekend, right? Why would you make our partners work through Thanksgiving holiday? Like, don't do that. We have a particular call to industry right now, and I was like, we are going to give people at least a month. I don't care what your milestone says. It's not realistic, because you are asking people a lot of questions. Our industry partners are going to take a lot of time out of their small resources that they have to answer this question, so I'm not going to give you 5 days to answer them.
Yeah, fair point. We can edit this out, right? We'll take out my complaint
No.
It's not the TradeWinds fault.
I am here to log complaints.
We'll fix it in post.
That's the only way we get better.
But I totally agree with you. We need to stop the own goals. So I'll bash on other organizations too. AAL had a solicitation recently where all the published numbers were that it was a $250,000 solicitation, but in DSIP it was capped at $200,000. So when you go to submit, all of a sudden your cost volume has to basically be refactored on the fly. So you do that day of, you're sort of screwed, right? We're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Absolutely.
AFWorks for the Strat5 program, my buddy Tim Nolan pointed this out, asks a disqualifying question. If you check the wrong box, you're out for the program. They ask it twice. They ask it once in the positive and once in the negative. It is like an SAT test designed to get you to fail. And this isn't the way we should be selecting companies, right? We need to get rid of the own goals. Anyway, that's editorializing.
Personal, right? So my husband owned this startup for a few years. I've seen it really up close and personal, the life of what it means to be, in that kind of a life, right? So I fully empathize and fully understand, and I think a lot of times, unfortunately, people who have been in the government for a long time, they don't have the view of how it is on the other side of it, right? And we're not thinking those things through. And I certainly can't sit here and defend the way some of our processes work, right? We're going to fix the Congress. I'm kidding. That's just a joke.
We're not talking about Congress.
We're not going to talk about Congress, right? But absolutely. But in all honesty, I'll stay here for a little bit longer after the talk, and I'm open to hearing any feedback about what we can do to make our process better for trade winds.
Awesome. Okay, one more question
Sure.
for CDAO real quick. It's a somewhat unique organization in that it is made out of an M&A event, sort of governmental M&A. Can you talk a little bit about what that process was like and what the pros and cons are of doing that? Because I think there is some pressure maybe at the top to start consolidating some of the innovation organizations. I think we have 270-ish.
No press here, right? Nobody's gonna.
It's Chatham House rules.
Chatham House rules, right?
Remember, it's a skiff.
It's a skiff, that's right. And nothing gets out of a skiff, right? You haven't been watching news for the last few years.
I'm an optimist.
So here's the thing. I think there was I wasn't there on ground zero, right? So I came in last April after the IOC, the Deputy Secretary Hicks already signed the memo where I'm creating the organization, et cetera, et cetera. And I, at the time, wasn't even thinking I was leaving Cyber Command yet. So I kind of ignored all the discussion that was happening related to AI. And I would say when I came on board, seeing, and first of all, again, back to the fact that I've been in the department for a while and seen some of the changes and evolutions of many of the organizations like DIU. I was at ATNL, RNE, that went through that separation, right? So I've seen a lot of these things. So it was very ambitious, right? And it is very ambitious, so that's one. We created a very unique organization at the OUSD, right? So it's not even a service level or something else. I would say we merged some of the organization because in some ways we wanted to, synchronize all these interdependent areas that the department needed to focus on, but they were kind of still being done not in that fashion, right? And not everybody's kind of, some people were protective of their rice bowls and they were, right, not working the way needed to. But being that organization, PSA, even today, right, we have acquisition authority. That is a very, unusual thing for an OSD component to have. So I have to constantly say, why should we have it? Why should we continue to have that? And what do we do with that? Mm-hmm. And then to top that off, I think to be quite candid, I think the organization is given a lot, right? So not only we're stood up as this brand new organization with very different cultures, by the way, that we have acquired and merged with, then try to figure out how we will become...
It's like an M&A, right?
How we become one organization. And as we know, some M&As are successful, some are not so much, right? And then you have to have the right leadership in place to say, are we going to become one organization, and how we're going to do that? And I think we have some ways to still go there. And then I haven't left up the word, right? The JADC2 piece that we have been given to do.
I didn't ask.
I know. But so when you think about all those things and you say, okay, no kidding, what are we supposed to be focusing on? And what are we really able to do? I think many folks in this audience will probably say, if you're starting a company, you're going to try not to do all of them at the same time, right? And I think sometimes the department fails to recognize that we can't give one organization so many things to solve because ultimately you may not be successful.
Yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue for my hard question for
Great.
Clay, which is we have 14 critical technology areas. As an investor, it is hard for me to find a company that doesn't slot into one of the 14 critical technology areas. And so if you have 14 priorities, do you have any priorities? So how do you, in the R&E organization, how do you actually prioritize within the 14 areas?
Great questions. Everybody know what the 14 critical technologies are that Ms. Shu put out? Raise their hands, who's heard of it? They'll know how deep to go. Okay, so many of you have heard of the 14 critical technology areas. There's kind of three bins, right? And from a venture perspective, which is kind of the discussion we were having, some of those are just defense tech, right? Hypersonics, lasers, laser weapons.
I don't know if AJ's here. He's going to tell you that hypersonics have a commercial use case.
Yeah, and the commercial use case for that's awesome, by the way. But yeah, I shouldn't have said that. I should have said, we should have stuck with the laser weapons. But
I'm still finding
some of those are still, there's a lot, when she wrote those up, she was trying to cover down on everything. And so she divided them into those categories. The ones in the middle are the ones that are primed for adoption, microelectronics. Some of those are, all right, Siri. Some of those are...
It's China. Don't worry about it.
Some of those, like biotech, right? They're a little bit more nebulous and non-specific technologies. The answer is the DoD wants all that stuff, right? I think for partnering and particular small business and venture community, it's about adopting what we are already doing on the outside. You know, we talked earlier about DoD investment in R&D is dwarfed by private side commercial investment these days. How can we take advantage of that? And so there are certainly needs for all of those things, but I would focus on the middle in this particular context for this community because those are the ones that have more of a dual use case. And we do need all of them. Believe me, I see requirements for lots of different things, and in our office it changes every day. And so we do need a lot of that stuff. It's a question of which one goes first, and that's about prioritization.
Yeah, appreciate that. Colonel Beebe, what does your office do to support the commercialization of IP that DARPA PMs have created, but never sees a real program, right? Have 4 performers, you down select to 1, 3 performers created real IP, government owns some of that. What happens to that IP?
Yeah, so essentially you're describing why my office commercial strategy exists, right? Or you're asking, you know, how do we take those programs that for, you know, lack of a better term, don't make it out of the DARPA basement, right? And so one clarifying point is that DARPA doesn't own any of the IP, right? So all of our performers maintain all of their IP rights. DARPA has government use rights to it, but how and when those are exercised is actually very rare, right? And so we typically use as performers universities, labs at universities, because remember, we're doing basic and fundamental research, right? So a large portion of our performers are universities, and a lot of times they'll spin out of their lab. You know, the DARPA funds the lab to do research, and then they go, hey, we're onto something. Let's spin this out and make a company out of it, right? And at that point, to your question, you know, how do we help them? We come in with the embedded entrepreneur and say, okay, you're a lab spin out, technically focused. Let us bring an entrepreneur in that can work on the product market fit, the go-to-market strategy, the initial funding strategy, the business plan, right? And so you have a de-risked business plan to go wrong with a de-risked technology that you can put in front of investors. The second group is... Do
you help connect with investors? Is there
a
program?
Yeah, so we have part of the pipeline that we work on, the stages, we embed the entrepreneur, we do coaching and mentoring, we have an ability to fund a little bit more in what we're calling minimally viable products to show product market fit. And then the last stage is once you have that and you've demonstrated it, to put it in front of a group of curated capital, right? And really, all curated capital means in our sense is that you have patient capital, and your investment thesis isn't that you've got to have a 10x return in 5 to 7 years, right? It's going to take longer than that for 90% of the technologies that I'm talking about and the companies that we're working with in DARPA, right? So we're looking for people that have patient capital. And so the second category is there are engineering firms, I will say, whose business model is to just bid on DARPA programs. They have an amazing stable of engineers and scientists, and they come in and they do amazing things. But their business model isn't to take that amazing research and turn it into a product. Their business model is to finish that and then bid on the next DARPA program that fits inside their business model, right? And so what we're trying to do is encourage them when they have those really good, when the program manager sees something and says this needs to go to market, like go talk to the commercial strategy guys, and rather than putting it on the shelf and just bidding on the next contract, let's figure out a way that we can bring investors in, bring an entrepreneur in, and create a company around this and get it out there, right? If it makes sense for everybody, right? And then kind of the third category is a combination of those two, but it's generally a really good tech guy that either worked in the lab or worked in one of these companies and goes, hey, I worked on this project, now I want to start a company around it, and what do I do, right? And we come in and provide the same services to those guys. So.
Great. Hey, we're almost out of time, but I'd like to give each of you a magic power for a second here. So last question for everybody. If you had a magic wand, you could change one thing about your organization, Could be anything, could be fixing the water cooler, whatever it is. What would you change? And you can't fix Congress because that's my magic wand that I'm swinging it right now. So you guys have to do something else. And we'll start with you, Shruti.
Okay. I think I would ruthlessly prioritize what we're doing. When we created CDAO, there was a lot of criticism about some of the legacy organization doing a lot of things that were not necessarily, lots of cats and dogs without necessarily tied to strategic objectives and priorities. And I think when we came together as an organization, because you got so busy then starting executing, we didn't take the time to say, what are the things we will stop doing? We've done some of it, but we really haven't done it at the level it needs to be done. So that's what I would do, so we can focus on what are hitting the things we want to scale.
I love it. Not a magic wand, a magic hatchet. It's very important. Alex.
Right on. I would seriously consider providing the DIU director with milestone decision authority, which is an acquisition nerd term that is Title X authority.
Which I haven't used so far, so there we go.
Right. So it's a big deal if OSD has this. Usually the services just have it.
No, I was just saying, as the acquisition person, I did not use the nerd term you did.
Oh,
so
no, fair enough.
kudos to you.
It's out there now. You can't put it back. No, right on.
Everyone go to the DAU glossary. I'm sure it's there.
And so it matters because there's really only one way the DoD makes things and builds things and delivers things and makes decisions about building and fielding those things, and that's with U.S. Code Title X milestone decision authority that comes from the SecDef through Undersecretary of Defense for A&S and all the way down to program managers at the Navy captain, Army colonel, Air Force colonel, Marine Corps colonel level. And so it's important to understand that authority. And for DIU, I think it is important to consider that sort of authority because in order for projects to transition from a DIU prototyping phase into a standard program office within the service that has a fully funded fit-up profile, it would be useful if those prototypes easily translated in their process and in the use of that authority into those program offices.
All right. Colonel Beebe.
Yeah, so the one thing I would change is actually the reason I'm sitting here on this stage is I started talking with Mike about, and there's several PMs along with me, how do we tie venture capital in this community, the private capital closer to DARPA. When a program manager starts a program, he has to answer a couple of questions. One is, the first question is, what are you trying to do in simple language? And then two, the second question is, how's it done today, and what are the limits of the current practice, right? And the answer to that question lies largely in this audience, the people that have done the due diligence to search hundreds of thousands of companies, and they know what the state of the art is out there, are best positioned to answer, hey, these companies are the state of the art, and this is where it stands today, and here's the limits to what they can do. And then, bringing some of those companies in as DARPA performers outside of the traditional pool that I just described a minute ago, and saying, okay, you've got some limits, but if you took this program manager's big idea and you were able to push it, what could you do, right? And so making that marriage happen, it's happened in places within DARPA, but as an organization, trying to find a way to better link the two communities is really what we're after.
Awesome. And Clay?
We okay? Here's my answer.
Yeah, shoot, go. No one's pulling us off the stage yet.
Got the magic wand. The thing I need in my office is connectivity. I need, maybe it's software, but I need the ability to connect with the venture community. I need the ability to connect with all the entrepreneurs and the Defense Venture Fellows out here, because it's really an exchange of ideas. Right now, there's a few ways to connect with my office. You can, if you've got an idea of a way to solve a DoD problem, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you're a venture partner, if you're a VC, we've got a mailing list, and we will literally send you our list of stuff that we're interested in. The second way is we have routine events. So is anybody familiar with GIFIX? Very few. Okay, so you can Google GIFIX. It's run by the Naval Postgraduate School. But that's an example of a capability where you can bring your technology out for free and let DoD warfighters play with it and tell you, no, the button needs to go over here, go over there. And that's a hands-on experience. And then the third thing we have which we also run through sam.gov, is our innovation outreach program, which is one where we leverage the venture community a lot, because if you're a venture capital firm on our email list, every time we run a problem through innovation outreach, we'll send it to you, and the ask is very low barrier. Send us 100 words on how your technology can solve that problem. But the hardest problem I have in my office is making those connections. So if I have a magic wand, I'm going to wave it and make that easier.
Awesome. I think the audience can help with that. Everyone reach out to Clay. All right.
All at once.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate your time. We didn't get yanked. That's good.
Thanks.